Alright, Ace and I are here up by the sugar house, and this stone here, I've done some work here to kind of open this area up, digging up some boulders. But what you're finding, or what I'm finding, is this kind of general pattern here that I always thought was just this. Hold up, Doug. That rock wall, which isn't really like a traditional colonial well stacked to keep sheep and herds in places, you basically have this rock wall though that's pretty old. And so what I thought, come this way, dog, was always that. I'm starting to kind of realize at this point here, when you look at the stoneworks, they're very symmetrical to this point, and it goes out that way. So this is almost like something that was sitting maybe up on this plateau, which drops off to the north mound, and drops off here on the south mound that direction. I always thought that was just like something that sat maybe up here, relating to astronomy and all of the various solstices and equinox, which were coming up on the rise and set events. So yeah, I guess that was the thing where I'm realizing this might actually have been a passage into here, which on this side of it, there's always been these stones here that filtered water coming from like this whole area. There used to be a class 3 wetlands there, and this whole space would drain into that cistern, which would go across the field or across the road and into this mound here. So we'll pick up the stonework here, but what I wanted to show, it's really windy so you might not be able to hear my voice, but that stone there is one of many similar kind of caps. Let's come this way, dog. You got a cook on. Look. So there's many similar kind of caps of that one, and they kind of come across this whole space here. You can kind of see right here. There's more stone. So basically these larger pieces, hold up, dog, like that, kind of come across like that. I think I hear the geese coming. Sun flying back over. In any event, there's the stonework there. Yep. Good boy. So we'll get up close. Another one's there. So this one here, this one here, and this one are all in this alignment, which there's your summer solstice sunrise and summer solstice sunsets out there. The winter solstice sunsets out there, and the winter solstice sunrise is coming off in this direction from up in here. And so now you look at that and you realize that with that stonework there and one more piece, basically, hold up, dog, if you know this, stop, dog, if you know this road here, there's stone under here that matches this stonework. And so basically, there's like, it's not so much about the alignment story here, but you can almost see how water would like, well, here, let's go to this one. Water would follow patterns. And so you basically have like this one here. Right, so like that, I always just thought was, well, it's just two rocks. Which it is. And then there's these over here, which I've moved around a bunch. These here. But what's cool about following that sort of conduit of water, right? Go ha up here, ha. And then there's like this. So it's almost like there's water channels that have been routed through these stoneworks. And then like they tear and drop. And so there's a theory, mine anyway, that water is used not only for timekeeping, but would actually just like distribute through here and be part of the whole system of telling time, mirroring stars in the waters from above, all of it. So yeah, stuff's coming out here as the snow is disappearing, but I'm also realizing that the crown of this, not the crown, the plateau of over by the sugar house has a likely entrance zone or some sort of stonework ceremonially arranged into that peak, which ironically, or maybe not so ironically, but does coincidentally or anecdotally, or maybe very intentionally connect to the mountain peaks behind it, relative to potential clockwork stuff. So yeah, it's really that time of year where you can start to see the stones pop out and the snow's gone. And now we have a ton of archaeology to start getting into, because there's a lot of people that just don't want to do it because it starts to open up a reality of humans being organized and intellectual and engineering at levels that our current cultural domination of certain groups and organizations, affiliations, whether it's monotheistic religions or statist governments, they're all behaving like Nancy's, or I don't know, Karens, but also like Chads. So it's not like a gender thing. You know, it's just one of these things where these people are just trying to storm over the possibility by just pretending like statistics don't apply when it comes to the manipulation of stonework. But hey, if it's a stonework and a stone wall, it's got to just be colonial, right? You know, there's no way it was done by anything else. You know, especially when you can then look at all these boulders around here and recognize the alignments to all of these positionings, prisons, all of these. They literally point on the southern mound up to the sunrise and the summer solstice. At a scale where if you did the statistics of the randomness of that many stones, that much boulder weight, just coincidentally being at this point on this hill, not over there, not over, you know what I mean? Like, it's literally in a very specific orientation, so that at the top of that hill, from a single point, You could also look to the winter solstice sunset through an equally statistically significant, non-probable or non-random probability that these stoneworks were intentionally placed as a positioning orientation. And at that scale, you can't fake it. You can't even use 76 horses the size of my backhoe to move some of these pieces. So you'd need significantly powerful machines that didn't exist in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. And then when you note the other positions of notations to that summer solstice sunset, and then the winter solstice sunrise, plus the equinox, it's really hard to not see a group of people. I mean, even look at this ridge across the quarry, right? The road itself sags between these two elevation points. And I'm sure, just like me, I thought for 30 years up here, this was all created by some 1950s group of quarrymen that came here and did stuff. And they did. They used some of it for the interstate of I-89, but I think more than likely, that was all just parts to try to cover a very archaeological significant site. And those interstates, whether you're looking at a Hitler in Germany or you're looking at an Eisenhower in the United States in the 50s, pre-50s with the Autobahn, and you look at that stuff and you're like, yeah, they were just using those things to wipe out the megalithic structures that pre-existed them, because they were taking claim to these landworks, stoneworks, these resources, because they were eradicating any former claim of ownership. For instance, running stones from one wave of archaeoastronomers, but the stuff I'm seeing is way pre-Holocene. So the only way you're moving some of these stoneworks, I'm not talking the ones that I think were placed in a Nordic wave by large amounts of people moving stuff, like forcefully working hard to create that reality because of the significance of the site. But I think what happened was you would have had a previous civilization where the waters, being at the edge of a glacial Lake Winooski, would have allowed for the buoyancy factor of physics to create the amount of engineering that was done. And we can't even understand the scale of that right now as humans, because back then, I would imagine, the amount of water force was so great, they weren't thinking in any other vernacular or jargon or thinking framework other than water. So these are the kinds of things where they would have wanted to understand, why is the force of water, why is and so as a culture, humans would have been thinking much differently than we do today about what's around them, how to use materials, etc. So, these are the things where most people don't really think that the pyramids in Egypt could have been floated into position. But the actual engineering exists, and if the water was high enough, which it was, and it's flowing along the Nile to where it all was, and the canals and ways in which they move that water would have made it easy to lift those stones into pyramids using buoyancy and not humans pushing or leveraging even or torquing. But that's just a theory. I'm not trying to always get into like the details, functionality and stuff, but I did want to map that out. It's kind of fun. These are the things where this time of year you can actually see all that's going on before the ferns come out. And so this year we're going to have to clear a lot more to open this up, but it'll definitely be a pretty spot. Either way, I guess that's what we were working on today. So this hill here, as you can tell, I'm walking up it, I think has, from where we were originally at, that boulder entrance, probably is like, it sits underneath there, and more than likely is covered by the stone at that ridge. Like there's basically ledge, and when you start to wonder, why is there ledge there? You know, and then there's ledge everywhere, but like certain spots where there's ledge that form this shape, which is almost like, I don't want to call it a step pyramid, but it has that plateau effect or the terracing. And then we've got, things like over here, this is just some trash from people, but there's definitely stoneworks and plenty of quartz for the piezoelectrics, which is exactly why this place would have been settled first after a glacial retreat, because the glacial ignition or deglacial ignition point would have been controlled in many respects with those piezoelectrics, as it actually does force that reality. And so when you think about it, this is that ledge, right? Like, why is ledge just sitting up here but not down there? And that's what this road is built on, or on top of. It's probably like a huge chamber. So that's one. Where, road crews and I have talked about it, like, oh, so there's ledge there. Because it's like, why is it not, like the stone walls down here? I thought it was always built up, but it turns out they can't really pack on top of, or they can't dig it further because that's right sitting on the ledge. So now it's like, do we want to take this section? See all that stonework there? It's getting dark. And this is nothing that I've ever moved. I've been here in this position, so I don't want to start messing with them in that orientation. But as we're digging this, getting set up for the farm stand, sugar house reboot, it sort of comes down to the like, well, do we want to start messing with that, or do we want to just put parking in here maybe instead? That always works. But the question is, what do we want to do first for this season? And this is probably going to be one of those sections where I think we're going to find the most interesting archaeology. And then it sits on top of this mound, which I think there's another entrance to it down by the pond. Well, up from in between the pond and the base of this. So I think there's actually two chambers sitting on top of each other at this point. Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, I've sort of been hesitating on sort of saying that publicly, but I think at this point it's pretty obvious. And, it's not like somebody's going to come onto the road and start digging, but it was also one of these things where, was it a chamber for the sake of, where some people think, burial of natives, if you will, or indigenous ancestors? For me, natives, locals, I'm thinking in sort of multi-generational archaeoastronomers coming through, not just one wave of any specific affiliation. But that's kind of where this whole space now has the potential. There's that stone ceiling, if you will, that would obviously retain a road structure, but then you got to think about what happens, if it actually is. And so for me, realizing that on this side it drops off and you had water, and a cistern entrance, this could have just been a huge cistern versus a burial chamber, and then that would have fed the clock works out this way. So that's kind of where I'm going with respect to what I think this is used for in its original design. And it, you know, it has this whole plateau effect up the trail through the quarry. And the symmetry is pretty much all there to the equinox. So I don't know. I mean, it sets, equinox sets, the sun sets due west on the equinox here, pretty well in between those parabolas of solstice, sunrise to sunset in the summer up to the north, and down here to the south for the winter. So the ceremonial importance of it, I think, is real. I think the equinox central axis of it is real. And I think the water pathing of the stoneworks that I've found already, understanding how there's like stonework here, would have dammed it up. So you might have had like a cistern, and you might have had water in a large volume area here, and then that would have flowed down over the stoneworks, maybe to the pond. But you know, the pond was enlarged in the 80s, so it's probably more towards like, you know, not as perfect of a like here's the pond kind of thing, but I think a lot of that was already there as far as the circle and the banking. So it could be these tiers lead up to the cistern would have allowed for the astronomy here. But you know, these are just theories. We have a lot to work on. There's a lot of research in play. Acoustics and frequencies are another part of it. These are the stoneworks. It's getting dark now, but you know, when you're looking at, let's see, get some light in there. Yeah. You know, I mean, how do you get these stones with bulldozers? And they're digging the foundation there, maybe, but I don't really think so. Part, and smaller ones were added to it for sure, kind of like what I've done elsewhere. And then I used some to fill this mound in as well. So you know, I was originally planning on coming off the deck with a walkout ramp that would actually connect to this, and it's just all so you could have walk-in access that way. But then this is so much cooler, and I'm really glad the way I was originally thinking. So that's kind of neat. But like these stones on here, that same point up there, to winter solstice sunset, and statistically the size of these boulders, and even the orientations around them that have, come on dog, like here's a good example, this one right here, I missed this for 30 years, like this ring right there with stones that's just kind of planted into the stoneworks here around these stones. So there's all this symmetry going on. It's getting too dark to show. But yeah, that's what's going on. And then actually it's been some pieces. Come on, buddy. You can start to see the orientation out to the winter solstice sunrise. And here, this is like where Reese likes to hang out, like stoneworks like that, spits in them. So all of this stone here is, hold up dog, we're gonna let dog into his space. So like, there's all of this. Right, that with the quartz in it, there's some stone there. And then there's stone there. I've done a few pieces on these. A large bit here. That one's actually pretty massive. And so they all just kind of connect from that space there and point right up to where the winter solstice rises. And you know, you can see, like at the head of our driveway, there's another massive boulder. And they just, all of them like underneath, big have just not been able to pick up with this piece of machinery. They're that large. So more likely than not, Earth has been built up. I know I've built some up, but like even before I arrived here, I think this whole space dropped off of this hill the same way it does to the north, much more dramatically. And as it goes, all right, buddy, I'll be right back. Let's do a quick tour here. And this is where the farm plan and the farm stand and everything kind of came to a halt. People asked, they're like, why all those plans? And it's like, this archaeology is real, and there's some people that don't want to believe it, and that's fine. But when you have the statistics and you understand, like this whole mound here, it was always just a drive around for me, because then when I renovated and built this place, Meadow House, we dug down further, and so the ways in which I've excavated have produced pieces of stone. Same here when we put our tank in, that when you look at these stones, not just the scale of them and the size of them, but statistically how they all align to this case, right? So you got this huge mound right here, which for me was always just a turnaround, which would be like, okay, there's the house, here's your turnaround, there's the front entrance, right? So, I mean, the house rather, and then the front entrance, you come in there, and you come up to Meadow House that way from the west. But ultimately, these things here are Stoneworks. Right here, another boulder. Another boulder. And these have not moved much from their original points of being picked up, or, my touching them anyway. And so I always wondered why this here you can't quite see it in the dark now, but there's a row of rocks that come off that rock wall. It's like, well, why is it sticking out facing in this sort of direction pointing to the west as opposed to just south following this rock wall? And that's the kind of thing where it's terracing, and I think it has sort of mound building engineering built into it, using stones that would retain, and it's not just here's the debris that fell off the mountain after glaciers. There's some of that, but ultimately it's been reworked. And I think that connection through the understanding of statistics as finitely as I do, when you recognize when all four of these solstice directions of rise and set events are ensconced in massive stoneworks, that if I were to pick a random transect and run across any given direction here in Vermont, from here specifically, you would not find those same levels of statistical patterning at those sites. That's the crux. And if you ask an archaeologist to be a statistician, you're not going to find many very capable of doing that. So I think a lot of people want to just use archaeologists as a front for science, but they really don't apply the science, especially the one here in Vermont. And I'm not trying to say, he's somebody that's a cultural narrative block person, but I think the prevailing cultural narrative block is definitely something that archaeologists hold on to massively. But that's kind of why our stuff paused. It's getting dark now. You can see all these stones on the side. It's right there. Kayaks right there. And then on this side, there's even more stoneworks right here, which is getting way too dark to see. So, all right. Hope everybody's well. Peace.